Steve Jackson for Worldcon. So with over 50 years gaming, sorry Steve, and 40 years designing them, Steve's pretty much seen the hobby from its inception, or its infancy at least, to its current semblance of maturity. The company of which he's president has produced some massive hits such as GURPS, the mega hit Munchkin, Illuminati, Car Wars, Ogre. So what we'd hope to do today is have a chat and get to know some of the man behind the gamer and perhaps some of the gamer behind the man. So with that in mind, I mean, you know, they are one and the same to a degree, but I'm sure there's little compartmentalizations there and extractions. Without further mind, could you please welcome Mr. Steve Jackson? Right,
Thank you, Colin.
We're done, Steve. Let's go. Yep. Okay, so in research...
That didn't hurt nearly as much as I thought it might.
I know, right? And all the research, all the work and research we did for it, right? Yeah, yeah, sure, yeah. Well, I did a little bit of research, and one thing I couldn't find out was anything about Steve Jackson in the early days.
That's as it should be.
By design, removed by the government, no doubt. So, growing up, Steve, I mean, was gaming a part of your life, or at what age did you kind of come across science fiction and gaming and the hobby and that nature?
Really not until I was in college did I discover organized gaming. I played chess in high school, and don't ask me for a match, I'm very bad now. But there were other games, and certainly my group in high school would have been a role-playing group had there been such a thing as role-playing at the time.
Right. So the hobby and the industry was a very different place back then in terms of what you just said. There was no
When I
role-playing
was in
group.
high school, it didn't exist.
Right.
When I was in college, it was beginning to exist a little bit. And
okay. So you were an undergraduate of Rice University
Yes.
studying law. So what was the game society? You said you met groups in there and fellow-minded people in there. What was the gaming scene like when you went to university?
Right. Well, we're conflating a bit.
Yeah.
As an undergraduate, I was studying biology and political science.
Right.
I graduated with a combined BA and went on to law school. When I was in college, there was a little bit of very bad role-playing and a great deal of wargaming, things like Avalon Hill and SPI games, played on a net of hexes.
Sure.
And I spent a great deal of time when I was at university on the school paper. I volunteered all 4 years. I was editor for my junior and senior year. I learned a lot.
Okay. And then you went to Rice University to pursue law. That was the thing. So biology, law, political science. What possessed you to leave and start a games company?
Good question. I was not as thrilled with law school as I might have been. I wasn't as motivated as a good attorney should be.
Right.
One day in my third year, sometime in my third year, I was, possibly second year, I was desperately doing avoidance behavior rather than homework.
Right.
I read all of the school paper except for the classified ads. And the homework still had not done itself, so I read the classified ads.
As you do.
And there was an ad in there for someone seeking an editor for a zine. Not a magazine, a zine. You know how rare that word was in the mundane world in the 70s?
Sure, sure.
So
absolutely.
I didn't know what this was about, but I knew that one of us was behind it.
Right, okay.
So I answered the ad, and it turned out to be the company Metagaming looking for an editor for their Space Gamer magazine.
So that was about 74, 75?
Yes.
So can you tell us about your work in metagaming?
Well, I did not get the job as editor. I was overqualified.
Of course, absolutely, of course.
They had not expected to find anyone who actually knew something about games.
This is why Steve Jackson Games is so successful, of course. You know.
So they put me to work in game development,
right.
which is the process of taking the manuscript of a game and supervising playtesting and editing the contents and trying to take the hopefully brilliant ideas in the game and make them something that you can sit down and play without the designer needing to be present.
Okay. So, I mean, back then, the hobby must have been dominated by things like Dungeons and Dragons and Boot Hill and Knights of the Round Table. So where did you see your work in terms of the Fantasy Trip and Monster with Metagaming? Where did you see that kind of fitting in? Was it kind of very much against the competition? Were they too towering to compete against, or?
No, it was more Dungeons and Dragons is fine, and by now I was in a regular D&D campaign. But here are places that it doesn't touch, that it would maybe be fun if it touched. Monsters by Ken St. Andre was my first development job. And for those who haven't seen it, that is the game where the monsters come up out of the dungeons and go rampaging into the city, getting even. It was a lot of fun.
Payback.
Yes.
Absolutely.
It could have been subtitled The Game of Payback.
And maybe will yet again. So, I mean, a bit of juicy gossip for you now. Am I right in thinking that there may have been some creative differences in relation to the Fantasy Trip publication?
To put it mildly.
Okay.
On the one hand, management at Metagaming rightly felt that I was taking entirely too long to really finish and hand over a working manuscript.
Okay.
On the other hand, I was upset and resentful that they had decided to publish it not as a boxed game, but as a series of little booklets without even an index.
Okay. So it's kind of micro-publishing kind of thing.
So there was mutual grumpiness. And eventually we managed to part in a fairly amicable manner.
Okay.
For a little while.
So for a little while. So no knives were drawn at that point.
No knives were drawn at that point.
So 1980, red letter year, the establishment of Steve Jackson Games. And again, you know, I asked this question in the context of university years, and I mean this in the politest way possible. But
which is to say, not very.
Yeah, we've known each other a little while. He knows what I'm really like. But so what possessed you to go out on your own? I mean, it must have been a huge risk.
Seemed inevitable. And I wanted to be able to publish the games that I wrote and other games that I liked the way I thought they should be done, you know, maybe a little bit prettier and classier, and then that I did not begin as I would later go on.
Okay.
The first releases that we did were very, very small in plastic bags.
Okay.
Distinguishable from Metagaming's only in that I had a better rate of plastic bags. I was using Ziplocs instead of refrigerator bags and a piece of tape.
Classy. Classy. I like the touch of Thanos there, by the way. It was inevitable. I mean, you nearly could have said, I am inevitable, and it would have been the same thing, I think. So.
Well, do you know anybody who is evitable?
I'm not sure is that a personal insult or a question.
Neither am I.
So the early years seemed pretty hectic. He started off, I think, with Raid on Iran, rather, and Car Wars, and then a lot of the GURPS books came out in the mid-'80s. So what was the company like back then? It seemed that there was no time for you or no free time, or it was just a crazy kind of chaotic...
It certainly was crazy, but there was also a social life. When I was researching Melee back with Metagaming, I had joined the Society for Creative Anachronism in order to research medieval weaponry.
Right.
And I found that it was a whole lot of fun. It turns out that the SCA can provide you with as much social life as you can possibly handle.
Obviously, your experience with medieval weaponry is the reason there's a table between us, just in case you get a bit upset with some of the questions.
Wouldn't help at all if I had a polearm.
True. That's comforting. Thanks for that. Obviously, you know, we try to set the guest at ease. The guest obviously doesn't try to set us at ease. That's the problem here. 1980.
Was that on a page of the book that I missed?
On my book, I hope it was, but
No.
Probably not. Probably not. I think you could probably take me anyway. I think
you don't see a polearm here anyplace, do you?
No, it wouldn't surprise me though, Steve. It wouldn't surprise me.
Well, if it's not going to surprise you, there's no point in it.
I mean, we could.
Friendly banter.
Touche.
There we go.
I was about to say we could postpone the interview and just have a fisticuffs, but no, you got me there.
Worldcon history.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it'd be memorable for sure. So 1982. youngest person ever to be inducted in the Origin Hall of Fame for gaming. 2 years after Gary Gygax, 1 year before Mr. Arneson. So,
Whee! I mean, seriously.
I know, right?
Whee!
Whee! So, what did that mean for you, personally?
Personally, it was a huge validation and a huge kick.
Okay.
People at the company thought it was awesome. In terms of sales, it meant probably next to nothing. My observation is that gamers love to give awards, but don't pay a great deal of attention to who wins them, unless it's the German Spiel des Jahres.
And with that in mind, no. So, so there was no improvement to the Ziploc bags.
Well, they were good Ziploc bags. We eventually released a whole Ziploc bag full of Ziploc bags.
And actually, you did. You genuinely did. Actually,
Yes.
So we look forward to the collectible, tradable version of Ziploc bags by Steve Jackson Game in the coming years. So GURPS Basic Set was released in 1986, and I think it's probably fair to say that GURPS and Car Wars are probably the mainstay throughout the 1980s. But, I mean, we talked a little bit about the industry in the 70s and how it was kind of just very much in its early stages. So what was it like in the 80s from the perspective of you being an industry person and being president of a company? What was the hobby like evolving from that perspective?
It was exhilarating. It was obviously a growing hobby.
Right.
More people were becoming interested. The conventions were getting bigger, the conventions were getting more organized. At the conventions, you saw faces other than white males within 5 years of your own age group. It was, hey, people are really doing this.
Right, right. And I suppose with the emergence of Call of Cthulhu and Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay and Games Workshop, there's a real sense of it kind of becoming something.
Yes.
Would that be fair to say? Okay. So, and again, this is another question that could be entirely misconstrued, but meant in the most polite possible way. Why did you create GURPS?
Because I was annoyed by the trend of role-playing games that could only cover one genre and had what sometimes seemed very strained rules built all around one genre, often trying to make the rules repeat the stories told in that genre rather than letting the players tell the stories themselves.
Okay.
This was aggravating, and the obvious answer seemed to be, obvious, to try to come up with a game system that could cover any sort of contest or altercation, that being what is at the heart of a role-playing game.
Sure.
The GM says, now you need to do this, and I don't think you can do it, so I'm going to make you roll some dice.
Right.
And the player says, oh, I can do it, but I'm very clever, so I'm going to do it this way.
I know we're jumping around the timeline a bit, but are those...
Well, I'm aware of the rumors that GURPS Mage outsold the original. I don't know how many the original sold, so I can't confirm or deny. But I don't necessarily believe it, because there is an element of fandom that really likes to think that their writers or their publishers or whoever are feuding.
Sure.
And in fact, we go to conventions and we lift a glass.
Sure, absolutely. And the feuding happens afterwards. Yeah, absolutely, sure. I mean, I just remind people that in answering that question, Steve has studied political science, so pinch of salt. Pinch of salt. I'm going to suffer for that one later on, aren't I? You're going to get me back for that one, yeah.
Sooner rather than later, I think.
Absolutely. So, Illuminati became INWO in the mid-90s, early 90s, 94 I think it was. Collectible card games were just emerging with Magic the Gathering around that time. Was that a conscious decision to move Illuminati to a collectible card game?
Yes, but not on my part.
Okay.
I really believed that collectible card games had had their day and had had their one big hit, which was Magic, and I should be spending my time on other things. A couple of my staff, Jeff Koke and Derek Pearcy, convinced me otherwise, and Inwo was born. And I'm going to put in a plug now. This is your first announcement that, thanks to Derek Pearcy, there will be a computer version of the game Illuminati. Working title is Illuminati Revealed. So, cool. Look for a more formal announcement soon, I should hope, and with little things like details, but yes, it's going to be very multiplayer and very illuminated.
Excellent. Worldcon exclusive. Get on your social media now. Well, after the interview, but get on your social media now. So, and look, not to detract from the wealth of publications that Steve Jackson Games has made, Strange Synergy, my favorite, Revolution, which is an exceptional game, Shea Geek, Anomaly 2, and all those kind of things. But we have to ask, Munchkin, how?
Good question. I did not intend for Munchkin to be a mega hit. I never had anything against the idea, but when I started working on it, there was no sense of this is going to be big. There was a sense of this is going to be fun. And I enjoyed it, and the playtesters at the first convention enjoyed it. We went to press. Monica, my significant other, told me that I wasn't printing nearly enough, and she was right. She told me that much on the second print run, too, and she was still right. And we're now in the 30-something print run of Munchkin, not counting the deluxe editions and so on and so on and so on, and not counting the 15 or 20 spin-off versions of the game. And apparently we still haven't printed enough because you people keep buying it.
Don't stop.
No, please don't stop. And I spend a lot of time, really, I spend a lot of time thinking about what was done right in that game and whether I could do it again. Because it seems to have a lot of things pulling for itself, all pulling in the right direction, and that and some dumb luck, and it worked. But if you ask me how, the straight answer is darned if I know.
So for any budding gaming designers like myself out there, that's really valuable. Thanks, Steve. Yeah, that's great. It's insightful. Yeah.
Be fortunate.
Great. Be lucky.
Well, no, you know about the Vikings when they chose their war leaders. Combatability was all very well and good, but they wanted to follow someone lucky.
Sure. Always goes back to the weapons with you, Steve, doesn't it? Always goes back to the weapons. Yeah. So I remember, this is an unprepared question. I remember a number of years back, I kind of upset you a little bit because I suggested Munchkin New World Order. How do you feel about that now?
It's still vaguely upsetting.
Consistency. Consistency is important. But you do look at the Munchkin line, and you see the likes of Rick and Morty and Munchkin Marvel, Adventure Time, and things like that. I mean, how did you get, or how did you come across the licenses for those?
By partnering with a company called USAopoly, which has connections, and they can get the big Hollywood licenses, and they do.
Right.
And they're fun to work with. They're silly people.
And are they game-specific, these licenses, or are they game-specific, or like you've licensed to do board games, or are they specific to Munchkin?
Well, they are published by USAopoly.
Oh, the game parent.
Yes,
right.
which possesses the license to do board games.
Okay.
And then we license them to use the Munchkin rules.
Right.
And in their dark, unholy vats, a combination is created which eventually springs onto the world.
So given the dark and holy nature of Steve Jackson Games, it's a natural
yes.
marriage. Sure.
Yes. They had a huge PowerPoint presentation of why we should be evil, and they didn't need it.
Yeah. Based on what you did in the 80s, right? Yeah, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I presume people here were at the How to Build an Evil Empire panel that Steve did yesterday, I think it was. Yeah, so it's still ongoing, I believe, the plans. So relatively recently, Steve, Phil Reed became the CEO of the company, and you began to take a back seat in terms of working in the company and to pursue other interests. Like I think your other hobbies are, amongst other things, Lego, dinosaurs, reading, gardening.
Lego dinosaurs.
Dinosaur Legos.
Dinosaur Legos.
Gardening,
yes.
gardening
yes.
with Lego.
I like my water lilies. No, I haven't found any way to combine the Lego with the water lilies yet. Give me time.
I will. So how is well, I won't call it retirement because...
Well, it's literally semi-retirement. I go into the office about half the work days, and the other half I don't.
So no change.
And yes, I am still working at home a lot of the time.
Sure.
But I like it.
Good. You're enjoying it. Right time? Did you feel it's just the company is just stable enough, or was it a personal choice?
Well, that's a terrifying word, stable. I hate that word.
Successful.
That's where horses live. But survivable into next year.
Okay, that's fair.
Which is, what you do every year.
Different year. I mean, it is I won't say fickle, but it's a hobby like that, where you kind of
yes,
look
it
into
is.
the short term.
I have the freedom of owning the company, so I'm responsible to one stockholder named Steve for quarter-to-quarter success, and that makes it feasible to look past what happened last quarter,
right?
Try and make longer-term plans, and so on and so on. But I'm still responsible to 30 employees and a whole lot of gamers,
And they'll come after you.
That's right. Well,
they'll come after you.
The spice must flow.
Yeah. Well, there you go. So, even set against that backdrop, what are your hopes for Steve Jackson Games into the near future?
Oh, well, other than make it into next year, I'm really looking forward to some computer implementations. I told you about the Illuminati project that Derek is doing.
Yeah.
A lot closer on the horizon is a Munchkin adaptation being done by Asmodee.
Right.
And we haven't signed the paperwork yet, but paperwork is about to be signed.
Excellent, fantastic.
On a Car Wars project.
You've been trying to do that for a long time.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I remember back even in the 90s when stuff like Elder Scrolls was coming out, you were talking about a Car Wars computer game.
Well, and a Car Wars computer game did come out through Origin Systems. It was called Auto Duel. And if things go well, that's where the Car Wars computer new franchise would start. Would be with an actual re-release of the Auto Duel game. And the same game, you're still playing top-down, gambling in the casino, fighting in the arena,
sure,
trying to solve the puzzle, and being very careful not to let your skill go over 99 because there's a bug and it rolls over. We're going to take that bug out.
Oh, don't. That's fantastic. That's wonderful. I mean, that's purely in keeping with the evil aesthetic, Steve. That's absolutely keeping. So, Car Wars computer game.
Yeah.
Fantastic. I think that deserves a round of applause. That's really, really great news.
Well, thank you.
That it really is.
I feel good about it.
Yeah. And of course, Ogre was released as a computer game.
Ogre was released as a computer game. Still available on Steam.
Yep.
Still has a little following.
Excellent. Well, it's not little following. I play with real people, so I mean. So look, I mean, we've talked about. It's sometimes hard to extract the man from the company. I mean,
don't do that.
Yes. You put your name on the thing, so so you put your name on the thing, so it's kind of hard to extract. But I mean, I'd like to focus on you as a person, if you don't mind, just for a few minutes. There's only a few questions.
Is this going to be like when they get an ant under a magnifying glass?
Absolutely. Well, I have some surgical tools behind me here, so we'll get to the... No, but looking back on the last 50 years of being a gamer, 40 years designing games, do you have any major regrets?
Yes.
Okay, that went well. Of what achievement are you most proud?
I think just being able to keep enough of the balls in the air for 40 years to produce the games that I loved and to provide an honest living, we won't talk about the Illuminati, for a lot of like-minded enthusiasts.
And if you could go back and tell 15-year-old Steve Jackson one thing, what would it be?
It would be to pay more attention to those rudimentary little computer games and study coding.
Right.
Because I'd like to see what I could have done with that if I had started early.
So, just hypothetically, do you think, I mean, if you did that, we mightn't have GURPS. We mightn't have Munchkin. Or do you think...
But I don't know what you would have.
Well, yeah, that's true. That's a fair point. That's a fair point. But we like GURPS. We like Munchkin.
Good. Well, I'd like to do them all.
So we're going to have a bit of a Q&A session after this. We're nearly kind of the end of the formal bit. Just to remind audience members that this is being recorded, so for GDPR reasons, if you do identify yourselves during the Q&A and you don't want your name or your question recorded, please let me know afterwards. But I'd like to...
and you will be snipped from history as though you had never existed.
Oh no, they'll still be used. The recording will still be used. We'll just be aware that they object.
Ah, that's a good one too.
I think that's how GDPR works, right? I think that's how it works.
There are little flashing letters underneath that says...
this person objects
right.
to this recording, absolutely. Actually, just on a sidebar, I work for the government, obviously. That's why you employed me years ago, that connection there. But we did this GDPR training, and at the end of the data protection training, the instructor took a photograph of the class and said, "We're going to use this on our website." I don't know. So, in closing the formal part, Steve, I've always loved the pivot questionnaire. So, inside the Actors Guild TV show uses that a lot, and I think it's a really kind of good, quick-fire, under the hood kind of analysis of the person. So, if you don't mind, if you'll permit me the indulgence.
Fire away.
Excellent. What's your favorite word?
I don't have a favorite word. I like lots of words, and they keep on making more.
What's your least favorite word?
Can't.
What turns you on creatively, spiritually, or emotionally?
Creatively, spiritually, or emotionally? Wow. Pretty flowers. And weird-looking bugs. And smart ladies.
Excellent. And aside from the present company, what turns you off?
Stupidity. Dirt. Greed.
See, that could be another insult. I'm not really sure where I'm standing here. I think there might be some young people in the audience, so we might bear that in mind. But what's your favorite curse word?
Oh, this isn't going to break anybody up. Shoot. Texas, remember?
Of course, yeah, absolutely. I would never say that in Texas. I would never say that in Texas.
Well, you'll have to learn to say it in the right accent if it's going to be meant the right way.
Even still, what sound or noise do you love?
I suppose the clinking of gold coins would be okay.
And what sound or noise do you hate?
Unexplained burbling water. That's
right.
a little bit of PTSD left over from surviving a flood.
Right. This is the flood in your house.
Yes.
Okay, right, yeah. That was recently. Recent enough?
6 years.
Yeah, that's recent.
And some noises you don't forget.
For sure, absolutely. I can only imagine. And I mean, obviously the house was...
Total.
Wow. And lost all your collection. Did you lose much collections in terms of...
Lost words there,
Sorry, did you lose much collection in terms of rare games or anything like that? The important things.
It depended entirely on what letter it began with.
Right.
Again, I had things shelved alphabetically. Those letters close to the floor, lost.
Wow, that's hard. That's tough. What profession other than your own would you like to attempt?
Computer game designer.
What profession would you not like to do?
I've already tried attorney, and I'm not fitted for it, so...
Okay. And the last question of the formal part. If heaven exists, what would you like God to say to you when you reach the pearly gates? Talk amongst yourself for a few minutes, folks.
How about, well, you were wrong. But we saved a place at the table for you, and we've got some rules questions.
Well, that sorts that one out. So I think we have some, do we have a roving mic, or do we have some kind, oh, there we are.
We have a mic.
Excellent. So we'll turn it off to the audience for the questions and answers portion of the event. I can sort of see. So if you do have a question, please stick up your hand. Okay, yep, gentleman there.
Incoming. There was the Ogre Big Box Kickstarter. Can we expect Car Wars?
I'm not getting a clear...
Sorry, could you repeat that question, please?
We had the big Ogre Kickstarter campaign. Can we expect something similar for Car Wars?
Ah, got it. The question was, will there be a great, huge box for Car Wars? No. We learned from that big ogre box, and the most important thing we learned was never do that again. It will be a sizable box or a couple of sizable boxes, but it will be possible to ship it at a reasonable price and to pick it up without hurting yourself.
Yep.
Hi. Do you have any recommendations on how to make Munchkin fun for just 2 people without it coming down to pure numbers?
The question was, is there a good way to make Munchkin fun for 2 players? And the answer is, find a 3rd player. No, seriously, I don't have a good answer to Munchkin as a 2-player game. It just plain requires the interaction between multiples. 5 is the ideal number.
Hi. Could you talk a bit about the Sorcery Series, please?
The Sorcery Series was a really excellent set of choose-your-own-adventures written by someone entirely different who works with Ian Livingstone. The British team of Steve Jackson and Ian Livingstone, neither of whom is me, did a magnificent job of starting the Fighting Fantasy franchise. They did Sorcery. They founded Games Workshop, and I am neither Steve nor Ian.
Having said that, I've never seen you in the same room as Steve Jackson UK. But just to confuse matters, right? Steve, you did actually write some of the Fighting Fantasy books.
I did, in fact, write 3 of the Fighting Fantasy books.
So he's not that Steve from Fighting Fantasy, but he's that Steve from Fighting Fantasy.
I'm that other Steve for Fighting Fantasy. Bibliographers 100 years from now, if they care about our hobby at all, will hate me and Steve.
I'm a huge fan of the Fighting Fantasy series, so let me see if I can get this right. Scorpion Swamp.
Check.
Demons of the Deep.
Check.
Robot Commando.
Right.
That it?
3 of 3.
Thank you. We'll go
Hi.
and then you guys in the front, yeah? Okay, sorry.
Me? Oh,
Good.
Hi. How did you manage after that many years get the rights to the fantasy trip back from Metagaming, assuming that the owner was, well, lost?
That was getting lost in the reverberations. Microphone noise. There we go.
Sorry.
Slowly?
How did you manage to get the rights to the fantasy trip back from Metagaming after that many years?
So how did you get the rights back from Metagaming?
From Metagaming for Fantasy Trip. The question was, how did I get the rights back? The answer is that United States law changed, and it became possible for an author to recover rights that had been sold a great number of years in the past. And I watched the calendar with bated breath.
So you now have the rights back?
But after that, but it was an automatic process.
Oh, right, okay.
Yes.
Fantastic.
You have to live long enough and wait long enough and file the right papers, and it's done.
Not to put you on the spot, but plans for those rights?
There will be more fantasy trip material, definitely.
Excellent, great, fantastic.
Working on a lot of it now, and actively seeking adventures in the range of 9,000 words. For any of you who are familiar with Fantasy Trip or want to become familiar with it, and like the idea of writing adventures, we are a market.
That's fantastic. That's a really, really good opportunity. I mean, that's huge. That's absolutely huge. I'll be on to you on Monday.
Will there be any new material for Transhuman Space, or any updated material for Transhuman Space?
Transhuman Space. No current plans to continue it. Sales just don't warrant it right now. Love to get a movie deal if anybody out there from Warner Brothers is watching. If anybody thinks that a really realistic space background would have a chance, Sai?
Yeah. Hi. What would you say are the most important elements of a successful game?
What would I say is the most important element of a successful game? Mass sales? Let's try to be serious for a moment. Virality. It needs to be something that when I play, I immediately want to introduce to other people, both because I think it will please them and because I want to play it again. And that's a serious answer. I am quite fond at the moment of the game Terraforming Mars, and that is, in my opinion, a viral game, even though it takes 3 hours to play. You may not want to play it again the same day, but you definitely want to play it again to see what happens next time.
Hi, I come from Japan. In Japan, you find many is. So, do you have any plans with world tour with new game? Do you have any plans?
Do you have any plans for a new game, is it? Or?
Yes.
Or translating a new game into so localizing a game into Japanese? Or just new games in general?
どなたか訳していただける方がいれば嬉しいですけど、新しいゲームを持って世界ツアーをしていただける計画とかはありませんか? Do you have any plans?
I think the question, Steve, is do you have any plans for new games?
New games to bring to Asia.
Asia. Oh, Asia.
Asia.
All right. So do you have any new plans for new games for Asia?
Okay.
Sorry, thank you.
Sorry about the delay. The short answer is no. I have no plans involving Asia right at the moment.
Aside from your global domination plans, which should remain secret. Any other questions, folks? Yeah.
Steve, you've already mentioned Terraforming Mars.
Closer to the mic.
Sorry, pardon me. You've already mentioned Terraforming Mars. Are
Yes.
there any other games that you love to play? Not even your own.
Oh, the question was, are there other games that I really like to play? Well, let's see. Right now, I'm playing a lot of Century, the Golem edition, if it matters. I'm looking forward to more Terraforming Mars with the supplements added in. And I saw a game yesterday called Root that I want to play.
It's excellent. It's an excellent game. Okay, folks, I think we might have time for one more question, and then we're done. That gentleman there,
back there.
Just in the middle there, was next, I think.
Oh, okay.
If you had a sort of TV or film adaptation that you were able to make a game for, what would you which one would you choose?
If I could do a film or TV adaptation, what would I choose? It would either be Munchkin or Car Wars, and that would probably depend on what kind of entity was offering to partner with me on it.
Okay. So I think we're given the signal for time there. So, ladies and gentlemen, could you please join me in thanking Mr. Speaker?
Thank you.